Our dear guests, dear viewers and fellow citizens, a good afternoon and welcome back to your favorite series, the Inter-University Debate Show. My name is Sharon Mukisa and I'll be your host for this episode. Our topic centers around the credibility of elections in Uganda since 1961 to date. And we're also going to look at Uganda's quest for free, fair and credible elections vis-a-vis the 30 years of the Constitution. Now today we have students, elite students from Kyambogo University who are going to be discussing the topic with us. And today we are going to look at various aspects such as the factors that contribute to lack of credibility in the Electoral Commission. And we are going to look at why people choose to walk away instead of participating in voting. And we are going to understand what do these elections mean to us. And most of all, we are going to answer whether our guests think that Uganda is a democratic country. So with no further ado, let me introduce our guests today. And in no particular order, of course, the very first one is Joshua Olega. You are very welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And next is a favorite on the show, Sharon Karungi Mary. We are very happy to host you again.
Thank you.
And we are happy to host Akampa Baker. We are very glad to have you on the show today.
Thank you.
And lastly, but definitely not least, is Kaka and the Angel. We are very happy to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay. So as I had earlier on stated, we are going to first understand what are elections, because all we know this season comes once in a while. After 5 years, we are always voting. But what are elections? What do they mean to us? And what is their legal framework? So taking us through that will be Joshua.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for this, let me call it an opportunity. So on the onset, an election can basically be described as a process that the citizen, or what people might call the wananchi, may use to cite their views, to possibly select their leaders, for them to have a say in how governance is done. Elections run on various bases, or on various levels. We have them at villages, we have them at counties, we have them at municipalities, we have them in districts, and not forgetting at the national level. So when we are to dig into the legal framework of this exercise, yes, we have to appreciate the fact that elections are catered for in our constitution. I believe in this case we're going to refer to the 1995 amended constitution, and there are various acts to that effect. If I may cite out very interesting acts, we have Article 1, we have Article 60 and Article 59. So for the case of Article 60, this is where we have the idea of the Electoral Commission coming in, which is our governing body. We all know that the Electoral Commission is that body that is going to give you maybe the rules that we're going to follow, the body that is going to stipulate the desirables or the deliverables for each leader that may want to engage in the voting process. So these deliverables may seem or may look like, what should you possess? What qualifications must you attain before you get into office? So this can go as far as, but is not limited to maybe academic qualifications, social standing, among very many other factors. So the Electoral Commission is headed by a few individuals who will be mentioned later on in this show. But if I'm to leave the issue of the Electoral Commission, there are various other acts that also support this entire process. If I'm to draw you back to Article 1, this is where citizens are given that mandate that entails them to go and exercise this right. And then, of course, with the occurrence of elections, of course, with carrying out of this exercise, we have to say there might be a time where some people may seem aggrieved. That's when we see other structures coming in. So these other structures include the judiciary, not to mention other structures, or to mention but a few. So what happens in this case is, maybe if at all an election is carried out and people do not feel satisfied with the outcome, we have the Memorandum Act or the Referendum Act. And in this case, this is where people can go up and then say that, hey, ABCD was carried out, but we're not satisfied. So let's push this to a body that is qualified by the Constitution to handle this grievance. So that is a brief overview of what the elections look like.
Thank you very much, Joshua. That has been well elaborate. And now that we've understood what an election is and what it is the legal framework of elections, we'd like to understand how we got here as Uganda. how is it that we are choosing to be a democratic country? So we want to understand our journey to democracy in Uganda. How did it come to be? What is that path? So Kaka, would you please take us through this?
All right, thank you very much. So about a week ago, I think, 200 presidential 200 people picked presidential nominations for elections, and we saw Bobby Wine and everybody else launching their manifesto, I think yesterday but one. But the history that has brought them like this far started, I think, in 1957, 1958, when the first representatives of the Legico were voted into the House. And that was simply like the start, and by that time it happened under the British rule, right? We're still under colonial rule. That's the first time it started. That's the first time an election was carried in Uganda. So after that, in 1961, that is when we had the first national election. That election involved two parties mostly. There was a coalition between Uganda People's Congress, known as UPC, and then Kawaka, which is now defunct. It doesn't exist anymore. So during that time, Mutesa, the Kabaka, was announced as the ceremonial president because they won the election, and DP came second, I think. Then UPC, obviously, with Milton Obote, became the first president of the country. And since that time, in following up in 1966, Milton Obote scrapped of all kingdoms. That means the ceremonial president that was there then had to leave the country, and there were no traditional institutions like kingdoms and chiefdoms. They were all scrapped off. And after that, that is when Uganda slowly started sliding into what I would call an authoritarian leadership, until, because elections didn't happen after that until around 1979, because in 1971 Idi Amin staged a coup and overthrew the government, and we didn't have elections from that time up to 1979. In 1980, that's when I think we had our second national election. That second national election was also won by the Obote II government. It brought the Obote II government into power, but by that time we had about three political parties that existed. The first one was UPC, that was already there, and DP, and then our UPM, which is now NRM in short, because the leader is known as Mr. Museveni. So that's when he also slid into the bush because he didn't accept the results of the election, and it was marred by a lot of violence and vote rigging by the president that was Milton Obote, the Obote II government. That is when Uganda had a lot of different leaders that up to now it's not clear how they got into power, but it's surely not through the electoral process, because we had people like Okello that got into power by that time, or Joke that also had presidency for some time, until Mr. Museveni, the current president, who won the Bush War and stormed Kampala. And in 1986, that's when we had a new leadership get into power. But it wasn't through elections still, because by that time we had only 2 elections that had taken place. So fast forward to about 1986 to 1990, elections happened. That in 1990 it was the third one, national election, but still no one was allowed to use their political parties, and it was just simply people expressing interest in being voted into parliament or being voted into presidency, and that one was also won by the incumbent, that was Mr. Museveni. Fast forward to 1995, that's when the constitution was amended, and yeah, we had elections, but even those elections didn't really happen with people being affiliated to political parties. It was fast forward to 2005, after having an election in 2001. I think that makes it the 5th or the 6th. Then in 2005, that's when the multi-party system came into place. That's why now, that is what made us have about 22 registered political parties as of now. And that is when we had very many political parties being formed, like the NRM, FDC, and the others that had been there since independence, like the Democratic Party and the Uganda People's Congress. So ever since then, we have been having the election process happening after every 5 years, ever since 2005-6. Yeah, we've been having it in 2011, 2016, 2021 during the COVID period, and now next year where we shall have, I think, another election. Yeah, so if you try and count them, probably it makes it more than at least 7 elections that Uganda has carried out ever since. So that's basically a brief history of the election process and how it came about in Uganda.
Okay, thank you. You have walked us through vividly the path of how we got to where we are, how we got to the process of voting every after 5 years. But then now the question I would like to ask, and this goes to Sharon, he has taken us through the whole process. We've understood where we are. But I want to ask, do you think that Uganda is indeed a democratic country, or that is just on paper and what is happening in Uganda is totally different?
Okay, thank you, Sharon. So, I'll thank Joshua and they are too informed. So, I think Uganda being democratic, partly, because when Joshua was explaining what elections look like, and then what Kaka explains the history and how we are here, where we are right now, you look at what elections are really, are they meant to be free and fair? Is our vote as citizens respected, or does it count? So when we look at all that, I think I wouldn't say it is 100% democratic, or 100% it's not. It's just, it lies there, 50-50. Because at a point in time when I do not have incentive to vote, because I feel my vote is not going to be respected, then I think that sort of credibility and democracy is not going to be there. But also, yeah, it would be democratic because we have different parties. You look at NOP, look at NRM, look at ANT, and all those. So the question here still goes to, and now these representatives of these specific parties of these elections and all that, are they respected when they come out? For example, if NRM brings out a candidate for the presidential election, or is NRM going to bring out a candidate for a specific, for example, today we are having elections for the youth, it's something. Yeah, those elections where we have the general secretaries and what not. So each individual, each party, you find like they have different representatives. Now back to the question, is Uganda a democratic country? Are these elections democratic and all that? I feel they are. It's just that the level of credibility of this sort of elections is still lacking, like on a high rate. That is to say, because as I said, it's not about voting and winning. It's about, is the vote reasonable? Is our choice respected? Are they going to read these sort of votes? Or am I going to be voting and I'm going to be intimidated by the army? Because this has been happening from time memorial. Like when you look at every time, let's start from the small elections we had, that is the NRM primaries. You're going to vote, it means there is a lot of security. And it's not like they are protecting you to, they're not protecting these individuals from voting, yeah? Or they're not protecting specific things. It is because there is a lot of intimidation happening around those sort of polling stations or happening around the country. That is why in most cases you're going to see Nook being beaten, or you're going to be seeing different individuals trying to, let's say, campaign and all that, for example, looking for signatures, yeah? Most of, as Kaka said, very many people applied to be presidents for this specific country, but how many people's applications went through? Yeah, for example, disappointed that this year we don't have a woman to represent us, but either way, let's wait and see what turns out from these elections. And as I said, when you look at the kind of past elections that were held in Uganda, that is between this, what Kaka says, the 1961 and all that, well, we see that it has always been a struggle. Who takes what? Is it being boycotted? Obviously, each individual has their own perspective, because I'm sure if you asked Kaka or Becca, if you asked Becca, which is going to be which person are you supporting, is going to tell you, I'm going to support Mugisha Muntu. But he has reasons as to why he's supporting Mugisha Muntu. Or you're going to tell Joshua, I'm going to support what? NRM. And you'll be like, me and NRM, we are apart. Like, I just don't like that party. Then there are us who just vote for fun. Just going to vote because it is an obligation. Obligation. Either I'm going to go and be like, I'll go with the majority. Either way, even if I vote Mugisha Muntu, he's not going to win, or ABCD is going to happen. So I think its level of democracy in Uganda is there, but we just have a lot of things lacking, such as the credibility, because we can't say, because when you look through the history, that sort of credibility is not there. Look at the 1961 boycotted by Baganda. Look at the following elections that are happening. You're going to see like they're kind of boycotted by someone or a specific kind of group. And for example, when you look at Uganda, because if our democracy levels were high, man, us the youth would really love to vote. But I've always asked myself, I've always asked the same question, why do I always think that, yes, the youth are many in Uganda, we have the biggest percentage, but how many people leave their beds to go and vote? I'm sure if you ask anyone here how many people voted for primaries, NRM primaries, very few individuals. How many people updated their voting registration and all that? Very few. And not because you do not want, but it's because you either know your vote is not going to be respected or it's not going to count either way. Because if I'm going to vote, for example, Chagulani, it's not going to count because someone is either it's going to be there's going to be a lot of bloodshed. For example, when you look at the previous elections, we had a lot of bloodshed. People die, even innocent individuals, because you're waking up on a good day, you're going to work, and because there is this policy of therefore you don't vote. I mean, you don't campaign from here. Don't go to this radio station. It is booked. Don't sleep in this hotel. Like, it's a lot of pastoral. So the kind of democracy that we have in Uganda, I wouldn't say is like the best. At a specific level, it is there, because for it to be democracy, you have to go cast your vote, they count, and all that. But all of us, when you go to vote on those specific polling stations, are you going to be intimidated? Yes. Is there going to be use of money? Obviously, because that has now become a habit to us. If you don't give me money, if you don't give me salt, if you don't give, for example, obviously, Kaka is not going to move out of his bed to go and do what? And vote for someone, because it's like, what am I going to gain out of it? Either way, it's still going to be the same system, the same corrupt system, the same system that is going to beat us, the same system that is going to let the youth suffer and all that. So I think the kind of democracy that we have in Uganda, yes, it is there, but it has a lot of loopholes. There is nothing, because either when you look at what happens then is, when you go to, because you see, at a point in time, if I go to vote, or for example, if I'm going to class, I'm used to going to class and studying. If I wake up one day and I find the army at campus, my first question would be like, why? Isn't this supposed to be like a safe space? Something that happens on polling stations. You're going to wake up one morning to vote, but the army is all over. For example, in Kampala. Okay, I don't vote from Kampala, I vote from Fort, but for example, in Kampala, you're going to see very many army people passing through. Not because they are protecting you, but there is something they are protecting, like, as them, because they are benefiting from this. Yeah? So, really, the kind of democracy we have in Uganda is not the best.
Okay, thank you very much, Sharon. You have highlighted that there is democracy like you've said, but it's just the level of that democracy is questionable because it lacks credibility. Okay, thank you. I would like to hear from Akampa. What do you think about that democracy in Uganda? Is it there, or you are on the same page with Sharon?
Thank you, Sharon. Democracy in Uganda, for starters, I think it is laughable. It looks a joke in everyone's eyes. If you look at what is happening with what we should be defining with democracy, one, a free and fair election, freedom of human rights, right? And then let's look at also, basically let's look at free and fair elections, and then let's look at human rights. And we question ourselves, are we respecting either of the two, being the fundamental core principles of democracy? Have we really respected human rights in the previous elections that we have had in Uganda? That is something that we should look at. Let's look at, I don't want us to run very far, because for us, we are the Gen Zs. We read history. That's why Kaka gave you a good and beautiful history of what our electoral process looked like. But I want us to look at now, let's look at the previous election and the last two previous elections. The most recent one it paints a very ugly picture that we buried more than enough people in the name of, I'm going to town, I'm going to do my own things, but just because you don't know that you're going to meet people who are in favor of color yellow or people in favor of color red. A woman was beaten and dressed in town in Kampala during the previous elections because she was putting on yellow. I don't think it was her intention to put on yellow because she was supporting NRM or something, but it is because there is something that has come into us that since the people who are in power, who should be giving us the civic education about what we should do as a democratic nation, have not done their role. Now we are seeing people throwing the anger back that we are not respecting human rights from either side, either the opposition or the ruling government. That when the opposition sees the ruling people in the ruling government, I mean color yellow, they might put up a fight. If you people in, I don't want to see people in yellow fighting red. People in uniform, the people whom should be calling the mouthpiece and the fountains of honor of security, that is the army, the police, and the rest, they are doing contrary of what is expected, what the constitution tells them to do during the electoral period. So now we see that is something that is so sad, and it goes against what a democratic state should look like. When you look at a fair and a free election, it becomes very funny. Let's start from the NRM, the recently finished NRM primaries, because as the ruling party NRM, it should be painting for us a picture of what we should be expecting in the general elections. If you tell me that you're going to invest millions, billions of money, by not millions of money, on a position that you are going to be acting as a volunteer in your party, and you are investing all that money, what should we expect in the general elections, where we expect you to get incentives, free cars, fuel, insurance for your family and the rest? What do we expect you to invest in such an election? So which means it is defining for us an election that will be much, much, much unfair, because there will be money laundering everywhere. You understand? For me to vote you, I must get money, because NRM has painted for us a picture. A delegate, I was talking to some of my friends who are youth delegates, and they are telling me, we are working. They have come to Kororo to work. What does that mean? But they are national delegates. They should be coming, voting, going back. You understand? But the person stretches the voice and they are telling you, I've come to work. That means that we are seeing we are seeing a bed where we plant seeds, a bed that we are going to groom seeds that know that there is nothing like a fair election. You understand? Because we are youth. We are seeing what our elders are doing. So we who should be promoting democracy, we shall not be knowing the taste of democracy, because I will not know the taste of democracy if the food that is serving me democracy is serving me unfairness, is showing me the only way to the top is through bribery. You understand? And that creates a scene for something that looks like unfair. You understand? So that is something that we should look at. And let's look at another thing, which is a core principle of democracy, rule of law. Are we really in the rule of law? Are we really in the rule of law? It's a big question. Are we in the rule of law where we have people being abducted, kept in prisons, and we listen to what happened to them after 24 hours? The rule in Uganda states if you should be presented to court in 24 hours, right? But after 48 hours, after 72 hours, they are coming, the police is saying, yes, we had him. We have him. He's not lost. You understand? We have him. He's with us. You understand? Is that rule of law? Is that democracy? So it becomes a laughing stock that for us in Uganda, we say, yeah, we have democracy. But you are keeping someone has applied for bail, and he keeps in jail. They keep pushing him, the bail, back. Is that rule of law? So we have a lot of questions. We as Ugandans should be asking ourselves about democracy, and what should we do so that we can see ourselves in a democratic nation. So for me, as I can address this issue of democracy, I think in Uganda, it's just a joke. I think democracy in Uganda is just a joke. It's just on paper, basically.
Yeah, that's quite unfortunate
Yeah.
to hear. But thank you so much. You have shared your view with us, and you have listed quite very many tenets of democracy that we ought to look at and ought to exude as a country that says is a democratic country, and the test for democracy as well. We as the youth, we ought to know what that is, what it looks like, and ought to aim for that. But then right now we don't have so many examples that are leading us in that direction. On the same, Kaka, would you like to give your view on what democracy is in Uganda?
Yeah, I think I think democracy, like he said, in Uganda. First of all, I'm just going to, and I rarely do this, right, because I don't like the gentleman. But I think Mr. Museveni is a very smart man, because people will go for elections, but you always see memes on social media, and since we are youth, we already know our next president, right? And people say that in a joking manner, and you think it's jokes, but it's honestly the truth, because I think democracy entails a lot of things. Like Joshua said, elections are supposed to be a process, and it's supposed to be a free and fair process. That means if we are going to have a free and fair process, you have to have everybody being treated fairly. I don't think that happens in the Uganda, and we don't just, because most people just wait for the year that we're going to vote and they start thinking about elections. I think it's a process. From 2021 when we voted up to now, we see the things that happen to the politicians and the political spaces, especially for the opposition, right? Because I think certain things are supposed to be a given. If you only have to inform the police, you don't need their permission for you to organize a sitting as a political party. But that's not the case. When NUP wants to probably organize something at their headquarters, it becomes a barracks. You find army all over the place, and they use state machinery, and this is not towards election. Probably after 2026, NUP might probably want to organize something to probably celebrate or see the way forward, and the place turns into a barracks, right? They don't accept people to access the place. Police goes and ravages the place without a warrant, because you need a warrant to go and search somebody's place. But they don't even use warrants. They just go barge into the place. At some point, they don't even use police. They use the army. You find the army commander, who is the president's son, shouting on media how they have someone in the basement, and that person is in the basement because they are affiliated to a particular political party. It's not towards elections. The person is probably a brother and he has kids, right? Still, there is no sign that there is democracy. But because people vote, and just look at the lead up to the voting process, there are politicians that cannot go to a radio station and speak. There are politicians whose adverts cannot be played on a national television, like UPC. There are politicians who own radio stations but can't host their fellow politicians there. Why? Because the state doesn't allow them to do that. UBC, I mean, it's the national broadcaster. I'm very sure I have never seen a Chagulanyi advert on UBC. But it's supposed to be fair. Everybody is supposed to have that freedom to express themselves on a national broadcaster. But sometimes the national broadcaster will break a program that they had just to go and show Museveni at Commonwealth launching his manifesto. So how fair is that? There is no freedom, there is no fairness. And it's like Joshua said, it's in the Constitution. It's supposed to be free and fair. Another thing that I find also very laughable is that the chairperson Electoral Commission is actually appointed by the president. And guys, let's be fair. You can't, let's be honest here. You can't disappoint your boss who appointed you in a position and make him lose an election. I don't think that can really happen, right? So there's nothing free about it and there's nothing fair about it. Because in the essence, the electoral process and democracy entails majorly those two things, freedom and fairness, and in everything, campaigns and nominations, in the lead up. I think we saw the letter that went to NUP, that they don't have the correct number of signatures from a certain number of districts. Then when the document came for confirmation that they actually had the signatures, the document was dated some time back, not on that day. So it just shows that they want to frustrate you. But because Mr. Museveni wants you to believe that there is democracy that exists, and to be honest, I don't really fault the Electoral Commission. I fault the ruling government because you use state power, you use state machinery to make sure you win an election whether you want to or not. There is no way anybody can convince me that there is freedom and fairness like in any election that happens. And also because there are places you can't rig, right? Like in that are opposition strongholds. For example, in Kira, where you have Mr. Semuju Uganda, you can't really go ahead and try because he has a lot of support. You can't rig, right? Like in the 2021 COVID, you can't really rig. So it just shows you opposition MPs will exist and they will probably win because of like they can't use state machinery to influence election results in those places. And then they later go ahead and, for example, you had Mr. Chris Bayomosi shouting, oh, we have democracy, oh, this. I don't think that exists because you know there are places you can't rig. You know there are places you can't stuff ballots, you can't use the state machinery. Even if you use, the people's will be done. So, and that makes them think, oh, we have democracy, but it really doesn't exist. It's a joke. It's basically laughable because it's not there really. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned something that is very crucial, that this whole thing is a process. And someone was actually here on a show last week and mentioned the same thing. Elections or electoral processes is not an event that just happens. It is the process. The entire time, the electoral commission is supposed to prepare us for the next election. It's supposed to make sure that voters register. It's supposed to make sure that its machinery is working correctly. And that whole thing is a process to how we get there. And we have seen, like how you mentioned, Becca, that it involves human rights, but as these human rights are being violated, not because there are elections tomorrow, but it is a process to show you that they are suppressing the political parties. They're suppressing these people that are related to people within those big political parties for a reason, to where we are going in 2026. So thank you so much. We have had the views of our guests on whether there is democracy in the country or not. Some of them have cited that it is a laughing matter, it is a joke to say that there is democracy in this country. They've cited the loopholes that are within the democracy and the low levels of credibility to which we cannot credit the Electoral Commission. Those were their views, and we cannot wait to hear what your views are down in the comment section below. We are taking a very short break, and we shall be right back.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back after the break, and this is our second segment of the show. So to continue with our discussion, I remind you of what our topic is, which is the credibility of elections in Uganda since 1961, Uganda's quest for credible, free and fair elections vis-a-vis the 30 years of the Constitution. So we had left off with our guests explaining to us whether they believe that there is democracy in Uganda, and they have given their views, and we cannot wait to hear what your views are down in the comment section below. So to proceed with this session, we'll have start with Joshua, who will be explaining to us the common themes that are seen within the elections that we had before, for example, in 1961 and the recent elections. Are there any things that we are seeing that are common within those elections? For example, it could be corruption or any sorts of things that are similar within the election. Okay,
Thank you very much, Sharon. For that matter, my submission will be in two regards. Of course, there are things that happen that can be described as positivities. There are things that happen that can be described as negativities. So it would be ideal if each side of argumentation was brought up. So on the grounds of positivity, or the good things that we see, which are similar with the 1961 and the 2021, which is our last election, we can see voter participation, which is very important. And as it has been reiterated by my previous speakers, or in the break that we've just come from, we realize that it is important to have citizens participate in this process. So by virtue of the fact that you have people leave their beds, we have people leave their homes, we have people putting maybe work on hold to go and cast that vote, I would say it's a very positive remark in that regard. And what else do we see? We see a bit of rivalries. Now, in my opinion, rivalries are on two sides, because a rivalry can be seen positively as a way to show you that the two different ideologies here that are being considered, and one ideology is being considered by the general public while the other is not being considered. What does this show? It shows that public's involvement and interest in this particular process. Now, the downside to rivalry is simple. Some people do not know how to conduct themselves in a case whereby maybe their views are deemed irrelevant, or in a case where their courses of action or thoughts of process are deemed irrelevant. Now, this is where it goes sour for us. That's why you see people going to the streets and rioting, damaging property, where we have people getting injured, and so on and so forth. Rivalry in of itself as a concept is good, but how do you move your agenda? How do you move your cause? That's where we draw the line. On the negative side, yes, we shall also talk about rivalry, as I have stated, there is the negative side of rivalry, right? That's where I'll start from. So the other negatives that we might have seen on the sides of the 1961 and 2021 elections would be, yes, there might have been cases of voter intimidation, but I would like to say those are misunderstood cases of voter intimidation, misunderstood cases of maybe voter rigging and cases of corruption.
Why
Because,
do you say they are misunderstood cases?
I would like to say that many of the things that we cite are based on assumption if they are not presented with hard evidence. Because at the end of the day, a claim or a statement needs to be backed by evidence. Why? For you to come up and say that maybe a state is corrupt, for you to come up and say that a state uses state machinery and so on and so forth, we need to put this under a very vivid light of analysis. First of all, I'm going to draw us back to what we've been discussing, just a little bit for context. What is the role of maybe the armed forces or the police in this electoral process? As I will be illustrating in my further deliberation is, when you bring in forces into the electoral process, they have three main rules or three main deliverables in this case. One, protect the voters themselves. Two, protect the officers who are in charge of that process. Three, protect the candidates in the process. Four, protect the property, right? As I've said before, there are some people who do not know how to push their agenda. They do not know, due to lack of a better word, they cannot use their words. Okay, so this is why we find people going up and then breaking things, going up and then inciting violence, going up and being violent in that way. So at the end of the day, before you go and question the presence of security forces in an electoral process, ask yourself, why do you think that we need this? Look at the advantage, look at the disadvantages. And I will also have to say that it is very, very unfortunate for you to weigh the disadvantage of something in relation to the advantage of that particular aspect. It's unfair for you to judge maybe your strengths using my weaknesses, right? Yes, we shall say that some incidences in the elections have been detrimental. Yes, there have been deaths, there have been injuries and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, if you came for that process in a peaceful manner, if you came for that process following the rules that had been stipulated by possibly the security forces, possibly the governing bodies, I really believe that most of these things would have been avoided. Back to the question, to the similarities. In summation, the one thing that we shall have to consider in this case is that there has been an aspect of democracy, there has been an aspect of freedom in this process, there has been an aspect of the preservation of rights on both sides, which is the 1961 and the 2021 elections. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sharon, you look like you have something to add or to subtract.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Joshua, like, I don't know at this rate if you are generous son or something, but okay. For democracy to exist in a country, one, you need to understand, because maybe Joshua just doesn't understand what democracy is. Because I think this is one thing. There are regular elections, yeah? We have had them, yeah? We also look at the multi-party system. We have had it. But you also look at this kind of freedom that we have is on paper. That is to say, the Constitution guarantees this sort of rights for like freedom of speech and all that. But then where does he get it wrong? Where democracy, we have a weak sort of democracy in Uganda. That is to say, you look at the kind of credibility of these sort of elections. Starting from what Kaka shows, the kind of boycotting that has happened in 1961. Look at the rigging of votes by the time, that's why His Excellency goes to the bush and all that, to have this sort of thing. But also look at the sort of militarism and all that. That is to say, you have this sort of heavy security sources involved in this sort of politics, especially during this sort of campaigns. Even if you say that I'm disappointed with him, I won't lie, you can't say that these things are based on assumptions. Because when you look at these sort of things happening, the themes he's trying to ignore. Do you want us now to carry you and be like, you see, because if we look at the sort of corruption and voter rigging and vote buying and all that, deep down we all know that, because look at, like, let me even first use the simplest thing he might get, the kind of example he would get. That is to say, look at the sort of university we are in. People to vote you have to, you're seeing people buying ice cream at school, at campus. Look at people saying, me to vote you, I need to have this specific sort of thing. You are going to give me transportation. Let's go to the NRM primaries. For someone to leave their house, an old person, you're going to buy me salt. Meanwhile, this is happening and he's saying it is not evident enough. Someone is going to tell you, for that to happen, you are going to be able to buy me salt. You're going to give me, to the youth. Some point, I feel like the youth, some of us, we are like, so, I would say backward, because now for someone to vote someone is going to be like, you're going to buy me UG. UG is even expensive. Now those sort of alcohol things that we get. So that's the thing, 1K, 2K and all that. But also look at the sort of intimidation. I don't know which kind of intimidation he understands. On my own perspective, I think that you see the heavy presence, presence of heavy forces at polling stations. Violence against the opposition, the Kaka said. Look at, for example, Bobi Wine. We do not need to now come and tell you that Joshua Obeka, come I carry you, I take you to these campaigns. I think there's a recent video that was trending where Bobi Wine is like complaining. I think he stopped to talk to his supporters, and then there's this lady, not even, I think, from police, is like, you're not allowed here. And Bobi Wine's issue is like, I don't see why I'm not even able to talk to my own people. I'm just trying to tell them on what to do. Is that then a problem? If then that is a freedom, the kind of freedom Joshua is trying to portray to us, then really, I don't think. But also look at the violence against the sort of opposition candidates and supporters. Especially look at the 2001, 2006, 16, and 2021. Of late, you're seeing, who? My favorite politician is Best. He's in, but anyway, I wouldn't say he hasn't done something wrong and all that. That's not my part to say. But is there a specific reason as to why he's there? What has been done and all that? So even when you look at maybe look at the suppression of opposition. Joshua, you can't tell me that you can't see that. Yeah, because you look at the arrest, look at the harassment they are doing, not for only politicians, but for also the supporters. For example, Becca comes and tells us there was a lot of bloodshed during 2021 elections. That is to say, I leave my own home to go and maybe look for means to hustle through. Yeah, but because I'm putting on yellow or because I'm putting on red, maybe I woke up on a good day and I want to wear my yellow top, or I want to wear my red top, yeah, or a blue top. I'm going to be punished because of that. Like, I mean, they do not have, because even if you say that these individuals are there to protect us, why then are they meant to protect us? Because Bobi Wine is coming in an area, you're trying to show that, you know what is happening right now is, there's going to be case, because all of us know that there's a reason these guys use violence. For example, I would use the most recent issue that happens at Kyambogo. Like, we all have, there's a reason as to why we have those sort of elections. Why as because I think someone was laughing at Kyambogo that we are always voting and all that. But this is the thing, yeah? I don't believe in violence personally. However much, for example, because we have failed to agree, should I beat you? No. Yes, I get there are times when that sort of discourse fails, but you don't then resort to violence, because this is something we are now trying to teach. This is the reason as to why you're now seeing the youths fighting, getting involved in this specific thing. It is because this is what they are seeing. This is what, when you also look at the kind of participation that we have, I think the kind of participation in Uganda, yes, despite the sort of laws, Uganda are still going to turn out in large numbers. Not because because they are showing that sort of desire for democracy. That is why I think these guys are right when they say Uganda's democracy is sort of a joke. To me, I think it is just on, in practice, it is not there. But on paper, that is why I said it is 50-50. In practice, it is not there. But on paper, it is there, yeah, that Uganda is. Because that's why I began by explaining to him, yes, how is it democratic? Do we vote the MPs? Do we vote the president? Yes. Do we have a multi-party system? Yes. But is the democratic world or the democracy that we have weak? Very weak. Until we understand the kind of things that happen between this sort of democracy, I think Joshua at some point, yes, we appreciate the kind of advantages that he gives us and all that. But let us also not neglect, because now, you can't tell me you can't see corruption. Like,
Joshua, have you been following some of the elections that have been going on? At least maybe the Kawempe North, that was a famous one.
Yes, I have been following that.
Yes, did you witness bloodshed and intimidation, police interfering with civilians?
I'll draw you back to something simple. Provided rules that have been set by governing bodies are met, most of these unfortunate incidences would not happen. Drawing back to what Sharon submitted, I would like to say that it is unfortunate for you to continuously drink from a cup that you call poisoned, right? Because you come and clearly say that yes, there is corruption here, yes, people do not want to engage in these processes because they already have a predetermined maybe candidate at the end of the day, or they already have a predetermined set of results at the end of the day. I would like to say also on the fact that you come and say that people know that for me to come and vote for you, you need to give me maybe salt, you need to give me ABCD and EFG and whatever she has said. But let me draw you back to a very simple fact. You know the rules. Why do you actively engage in activities that break those rules? You cannot come and say that there is no democracy, you come and say that there is corruption, but in fact, in practice, you may find yourself engaging in activities that go against what you are fronting for, right? You can come and say that when you go to campus elections, or we're always voting and so on and so forth. The reason as to why we voted recently was because, unfortunately, the guild was dismissed or expelled, right? But if we're to look at the circumstances that led to this occurrence, we'd like to again draw you back to a simple statement. If the rules were followed, this wouldn't have happened, right? Now, I'm also going to draw you back to another thing. It is unfortunate for you to weigh your advantages against my disadvantages. A fair playing ground would be, lay your disadvantages against my disadvantages. What would that show? A level of fairness, a level of playing field. Because now you're bringing us, or you're painting for us a picture that, you know what, we are oppressed, people go out and they're getting killed and so on and so forth. Those things would happen if at all rules are broken in one particular point of time. Yes, we would like to say that those dates were unfortunate. We will not retract that statement. But at the end of the day, do we have elements of the concepts we're discussing today happening? Do we have levels of democracy? Yes, we do have them. Do we have levels of fairness in these elections? We do have them. Do we have freedoms in these elections? Yes, we do have them. Such in the case of Chagulani's, of Honorable Chagulani, coming up and going to maybe a radio station and saying, I want to do ABCD, and then him being barred by security forces and being told that you shouldn't be here. Let's go back to the rule book. You know that there are forces that really are meant to keep you safe. You know that there are forces that are meant to keep this whole process in line. And if those bodies come up and say that, you know what, on this particular day and time, this cannot be done, why don't you follow suit?
Okay, Joshua, maybe a follow-up question. I would like to understand, do you think that the forces that are being involved during the election process are the correct kind of forces to be there? Do you think those are the forces? Because we saw JAT, people being enforced. We keep on seeing different armies and specialized armies coming into a civilian election. So do you think, because what you say is that you go back to the drawing board and see that the authorities that are maybe blocking you from doing something, and you have to listen to what they are saying, but should those authorities be in that place at that time?
You know, different security incidences call for different forces to be placed or to be deployed. If at all the state, or if at all the security forces themselves deem it necessary to exercise a certain level of force, it is upon their discretion to exercise that same level of force. So for them to deploy during the JAT that you talked about, I believe it was upon their discretion to say that, you know what, whatever might happen here will require the intervention of this said force. On the grounds of deployment of maybe the police and the army, their mandate is to protect the people. Some forces are trained in particular ways. The situations that the police can cover, the situations that the army is more suited to cover. For situations that the police can cover entail areas where we really aim to keep the citizens safe, because the army is going to come up in an incident whereby now we have violence that the police might not be in position to quell, right? And I'll still draw it back to what I said in response to this. Different incidences will call for different intervention methods. So it's still back to the security forces. If we see that this threat will require this force, or if they see that a particular threat is going to require a particular force, they will deploy that force in relation to the threat or in relation to the perceived threat.
Okay, and usually the army is deployed when there is a threat to the country.
Yes.
And police is meant to protect,
Yes.
keep law and order.
Yes.
And they hold, I think they call it a baton.
Yes, yes,
Is
yes,
what they use to beat the people, just to put them in order. They're not supposed to have guns to shoot at them.
yes, yes, yes.
But then at different instances, we have seen a different kind of force. The force that is meant to only come up when the country is under terror, when when there is terrorism, in
Yes, yes,
short.
yes.
So I want to ask, do you believe during an election there could be maybe key things that could spark terrorism? So you would think that is why they bring the army to this space.
You know, terrorism in itself needs to first be analyzed, right? In this case, what do I mean? Terrorist acts or terrorism motives can be carried out on an internal basis. They can be carried out on an external basis. No, on the onset, terrorism basically looks like going up against a government in an ill manner, right? Using deadly force. You know, I'll draw you back to the issue of the Bush War. Whatever our current president did in the Bush War might have been questionable. In fact, is questionable, right? And can be seen as an act of terrorism against that current government, because you have not followed the channels that need to be followed for you to table your grievance. Now, back to the question. Do we see that the level of force being used being appropriate, if I'm still correct in that regard? And I'll still draw you back. If security forces deem it necessary to deploy a particular force, there are some metrics that they consider. They might consider in this case that someone going up and maybe using any form of hateful speech, or maybe someone going, let's first scrap the example of hateful speech. We might say that someone going up and maybe inciting a particular level of violence might require particular deployment of a force. So that's why you see the security forces coming up and deploying these particular forces. So yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Becca, I would like to hear your opinion on what exactly he has submitted. What do you think? Because he tells us that all of these things that we claim are happening don't have hardcore evidence. And it's because people are not following the rules that should be followed. That is why they are led to those particular instances. So what do you have to say about that? Are you on the same page with him?
I would not want to start like that, that I'm on the same page with him. Because one, Joshua is not Ugandan. Joshua is not Ugandan. And two, basically Joshua is hiding something behind whatever he's saying. I believe in whatever that, those cases that he brings out, that when a certain measure requires a certain force, it should come out. I believe in him, right? I believe in him to a certain extent that when a certain leveled playing ground is put in place, certain things should be avoided. I believe in him. But do we see those things happening? We have tried to put a leveled ground for all the candidates. That's what should be. That's what the Constitution provides for, a leveled playing ground for all the candidates in the political season like this one. Do we see it happen? No. His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni was going for a nomination. We saw a certain weight of the lady that was behind him, right? And we saw what accompanied it. People on borders, people on foot, people on lorries, all painted yellow, heading to Kololo, right? It was very right and just. Let's see what happened at the other side of Chagulanyi. You don't want to know what happened in that area. I don't know which playground that did not have, where the referee did not see that there was a need to level the playing ground. I don't know. In this case, the referees are the security organs. I don't know what Bob Wine did wrong in Natete that His Excellency Tibuhabura did not do on his nomination day. I did not see that. So, for me, if they would pronounce that Bob Wine and his group have an element of terror, that they are always, that his people or the opposition team, that they always call for a certain level of terror to the country, I believe and I go with Joshua, let them deploy that level of security, Joshua. But I don't believe so. I don't want to believe that way. I want to look at what Joshua said. The former expulsion of the University Guild president. I think I've never heard that. I heard that in Kyambogo University. What called for that? You understand? They accuse him of extreme levels of violence, right? I want to go with what Joshua said. They are accused. But we as Kyambogo students, we know the level of violence that was inside campus. We know, we saw that. Personally, I don't believe in violence. I believe in dialogue, right? But why did Akiso move to that level of violence, right? What pushed Akiso to move that way? It is what what groomed him, right? Akiso has been groomed in a generation where he knows that violence is the only way things can be solved. I want to tell you the truth. That is the reason as why we are all violent in a certain level. You understand? In a certain level. That the level of which, at which politics is in Uganda, we must be violent a bit. He comes from a political party where the president, one time, recorded on camera, he was on top of what? Of a table in parliament, right? So, such a role model, you don't expect him to give you a certain level of what? Of channel to move with when things get out of hand, where you need to dialogue, where you need to push with words, more words, other than being violent. And another thing is that the level of violence that was in Kyambogo did not call for that level of security and exaggeration that it called for. Because I did not see any damage of property, apart from what I would now say that I do not love to see, is that some students used to get hurt in the process, right? Which is not good, you understand? But the reason as why the security organs would use a lot of force in coming what would be calling a demonstration. The only problem with the Ugandan police, I think they need education about what a demonstration is, and they should know that demonstration is catered under the Constitution of Uganda. I think our police needs to know that. And there is a certain level of security that should be given to the people who are demonstrating, because it is always peaceful. A demonstration is aimed to be peaceful. So when you look at that, I want to believe that it is bad to be violent, but I also want to talk about this. He brought up a pertinent issue that I want to talk about, an issue of hate speech, that it is causing violence and it calls for a certain level of security and the rest of the things. No. Hate speech is bad, and it brings some level of biasness in the voters themselves, right? Because a voter might listen to this one and they are using words against this one, and they may take the other side. It brings a certain level that is unjust in the election process. But now, if we have such words that are unfair to the other voter, we have laws. You understand? The only reason that we find the Constitution of Uganda laughable about right now is that laws are meant for specific people. Some people are not faced with the laws. Laws are meant for a certain group of people, and they have to face the repercussions of the law, right? Others are on the safe side of the what? Of the law. You understand? Why is I am enjoying what kind of Tafira is doing of late. I don't know if that is hate speech, but the man is telling us a lot of facts, which is now beautiful that it is coming from their person who is an insider, person who went for the guerrilla war, He was part of the 27 guns, and he's telling us what exactly is should be done. You understand? But the only reason is the government is getting that whole thing and making it hate speech. I don't want to call it hate speech. Because somebody comes on the table of parliament and tables things and they say that is hate speech. The only issue I have with the president of NUP is one. He has not presented to me a proper statement for me that would make him and not that would make him a better speaker. Not I don't, for a lack of a better word, I don't want. He has not presented for me a good speech, a manifesto. Because everything that comes up is Museveni. It's like he's rapping Museveni. No. I want him to come and give us an alternative. You understand? Museveni has been there for the last, I don't know, because even I think our produce kids, they will not know another president. They will be knowing Museveni. So one thing is, I want him to present to us an alternative, right? Not singing. Because you people, Museveni has done, I don't want to say the worst, but Museveni has done something for us as a country. You understand? He brought us from somewhere, he has put us somewhere. The only problem is now that he is, the good things that he had brought for the nation, he's now turning the table. And now the tea is speeding. So I would say that it is time for him to go. And what should I recommend right now? In what according to what Joshua said as I finish. One, agree with me, disagree with me, we need strong civic education. People are turning up for voting, but they are not turning up to vote. People are turning up to vote because they are paying debts. I gave you my money, you have to come and vote me, right? I gave you sorot, I gave you a child a job. You understand? I bought you waraji. You have to come back and pay back in form of what? In form of so people are not turning up to vote because they are interested. You understand? People are turning up to vote because they are paying debts, right? Two, we as the youth, we are now desperate and we don't know even the importance of the elections, right? Because what do we know an election is? We know that an election is one, an avenue for making money. Two, it is an avenue where we have now to create gigs because all the youth are targeting to be polling agents, they are targeting. You understand? That is what we see. Personally, to me, that's what I see an election as. A gig center now, right? So, it is a gig economy. I no longer see the Electoral Commission making sense to me because one, it should be called the Independent Electoral Commission. But the big question is the Independent Electoral Commission independent? The second question is, why should an Independent Electoral Commission have a boss who is the president? So you think the chairman Electoral Commission will play cards against his boss? It is so ironic, and it's a big question for the whole nation. So to me, it is a big question that we no longer have an Independent Electoral Commission. We don't have an Independent Electoral Commission. I want to say that very well. We don't have it because a president cannot appoint an Electoral Commission. You don't expect someone I have employed to pray against me. That is wrong. After civic education, we need to make reforms in our constitution. The reason as why we are suffering right now, we are seeing very many things, is that because we have had a persistent government and they have made the country their home. They do what they want. I want to look at recently, the recently concluded, because in the same topic that we're discussing, we discussed the constitution. So we saw the age limit being scrapped off the what? In the constitution of Uganda, and it was one of the pertinent things that we should see. You people, change of government, we don't know what may come with the change of government, but it is always beautiful because every person that comes in brings another impact on the country. You understand? Because I am telling you, Ugandans are tired of the same face. And now he's coming to say he has a new vision, protecting our gains. Which gains are you going to protect? You and who? So it is a question of really we need change, but we have seen changes happening. So I don't know the changes that we need, that we have seen. One of the most recent that is disturbing me, the amendment of the what? UPDF Act. So dangerous. And our fathers, our role models in parliament, said yes, and the act was what? Was passed. So when we are talking about Uganda, democracy, freedom, and the rest of the things, I want to say that it is just, we are just a laughing stock. It is just, because of the nature of the democracy that we have, people are taking some, how do you tell me, people dress the way they were dressed, are coming, let's leave the dressing part. Appearances can be deceptive. But how do you tell me that those people are coming up to become presidents of the nation, pick nominations? You understand? Which country have you had that we have people over, not 10, 20, 30, 100, they are coming for nomination papers for the presidency? Laughable. Uganda is now becoming a laughing stock. You watch international news and they are laughing about Uganda's political scenery. It is. So that's where Uganda, that's where our country is. But what I would beg us of is now that we should go back to the roots. Let the youth now, we who claim that we are civilized, right? Yeah, we claim, because we are doing a lot of, we are doing a lot of contrary of what we are preaching here on live shows. I might come here and talk about corruption and do what, but the moment I move out here, I meet a political nani outside there. They will take the money and move on. So if we practice exactly what we preach, we have gone to school and we know what democracy is. What are the principles of democracy? If we tried to educate the next neighbor, the next neighbor, the next neighbor, we would have a better generation with a better democracy, and that would be beautiful of us as a nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Akampa. You have mentioned what the problem is, and you have suggested one of the recommendations as a civic education. So thank you very much. What you're doing today is part of that. So you're educating a lot of people and encouraging them, also showing them what is wrong that they should stand up against. So coming to Kaka, they have mentioned a lot of loopholes within our system, and you have outly stated that democracy is indeed a laughing stock in our country. So I'd like to know, what recommendations would you give to the youth, to the Electoral Commission, to stakeholders?
Because all of us here are youth, right? So I'll start by giving Joshua a recommendation, right? And the recommendation for me would be stop being delusional. That's the thing, because I think you are defending something that is undefendable. You are defending something and you are sounding like an interim politician. Because I remember there was a time I was listening to the Capital Gang, and they asked, because there was someone that went to hospital and there was no bed at Mulago, it's a national referral hospital, and they slept on the floor, and a gentleman called Emmanuel Dombo was saying, oh, we think the hospitals are working very well because they have very many numbers and we don't have space. People go there because it's working. I think that's the kind of delusion that Joshua exudes when he speaks the way he speaks. Because for me, the evidence is clear. On Monday, I think, or Friday, I stay in Naguru Hill, and when there was nominations for Mr. Museveni, I got out of the gate at home and there were soldiers at the gate. And the Constitution says it clearly. Is our home a risk? That's the risk to the country, that the soldier has to be there early morning with guns? I don't think it is. So the evidence is clear for you to see. I am sure you've come across, sometimes you have to be stopped for hours just because Mr. Museveni is passing. That is his mandate. It's not a problem. But on election date, there was no one that probably stopped traffic for Chagulanyi to pass, for Mafabi to pass, or even for Munyagwa to pass. But they did that for Museveni. Is that fair in any context? So for me, I think as youth, we just need to be serious about, like you said, sometimes it's just the gig thing, and because you want a gig, you will go and defend Museveni and his government, but certain things are not defendable. the truth is, right, if Museveni gives me money, I will take it, but I will never defend him. Because it's you look very funny trying to defend something that you can't defend. So for the youth that are out there, if you are probably offered money to talk, probably appreciate the government and all, you can't appreciate something that it's not appreciable. Because if you read probably the old newspapers a lot, or on the internet probably, you'll see that after 1986, when Mr. Museveni got into power, up to around 2001, I think he made very drastic changes that we all appreciate in this country. But after that, I think it has just been a downward trajectory after that. So as youth, let's just not defend something that is undefendable. The second thing to the youth out there, and probably everybody, is I want us to read, right? Even if you can't read, listen to political shows. And when you're listening to those political shows, try and be as neutral as you can, as subjective as you can. So don't be objective or something. Because when I listen to a campus speak and he tells me, I'm not a Bobby Wine supporter, I don't support any political party. But when I listen to a campus speak and he tells me, NUP has not given me an option, I think that itself is laughable. Because the Minister of Finance, the Shadow Minister of Finance, presented an alternative budget in Parliament. And you only get these things by reading. If you don't read, you probably won't get them. So if the youth read, if a camper read, he would know that there was an alternative budget that was presented. And for me, the budget was much better than the budget presented by, what's this gentleman, the one who says money will come, Matia Kasaija, right? That one, he presented a budget, but for me the budget wasn't good enough. The alternative budget that was presented, I don't remember the shadow finance minister of the opposition, but it was a good budget. I think it was Semuju. And he went ahead and highlighted certain things. That's why I said we should watch these political shows and probably listen to radio, read them, because he presented a budget and showed you certain things that exist in that parliament that should not be there and would probably be better, those resources being transferred somewhere. For example, you have the Deputy Speaker of Parliament and the Speaker of Parliament spending $1 billion or even more on generators at their residences. And you don't tell me you got that money because you're speaker. No, you got it through corruption. And that because like under evidence that he talks about, someone is buying generators of 500 million, and then a health center for somewhere in Karamoja has a budget of 150 million for a whole year. And you say that is not evidence enough, you think you have to support Museveni. That is a problem. I think as youth, right, we have to be subjective in whatever information we consume. And let's try and consume the right information. Read, look at these talk shows, watch political shows on TV, get opinions. That then means we can enforce some level of change into the way we act. Because if you don't have the information, then you will probably not do the right things. If you have the information, you probably do the right things. And it's the same thing with our parliament and the rest of it. Probably you had a very nice 1995 constitution, but every other time it has to be amended, right? And this is the the joke about it, that you might probably amend it when you're in government, and then when you leave government, it comes back to bite you. A very clear example is Amama Mbabazi, right? When we were going to the 2016 elections, they went and there was something about gatherings, and there was a law that was passed, an amendment about gatherings and police being able to give you permission to gather when it's like in the constitution that you have to be free So when he left Parliament and he was contesting, I think it was Go Forward, to be president. By that time I was in senior 2, I think. I went to campaign in Gulu and he was beaten properly because of that law that he put. Because he's one of the people that pushed for the law that you are not supposed to gather unless you have permission from the police. I think he didn't get permission and he was beaten. So if you make like decisions that, because you're in government and you make those decisions, and most of these decisions are made because you're objective, you don't think about the future. And as a youth, if you're objective and you probably want to die under the wing of NRM and you're not, or NUP or FDC, because I think all these political parties have their flaws, right? But I also think the one that is in power has a contract with the people to deliver on the best things that they can to the people. The moment they don't do that, then it becomes a problem. Again, those members of parliament, they make decisions that probably sometimes, like the UPDF Act, like he says, they just, you don't understand why they're making those decisions. And also probably someone is in, and I still find this a problem for me up to now, because the qualification for you getting to the parliament is a Form 6, right? And these laws that are made affect people that have probably studied more than that. I think for me it then becomes a problem, because the people that would probably be making those laws don't have, sorry to say this, but maybe they don't have the mental capability to make laws that favor everyone in the country, because they're just Form 6 graduates. And well, we keep it the way it is, but someone is focusing on how I should dress instead of focusing for me on something like that, because it would probably make a difference if you say you should have at least a degree for you to be a member of parliament. I know politics is supposed to be inclusive, but yes, the inclusivity has to come with a little bit of having the information to make the right decisions. Because if you're in that position and you don't have the information, then. So for me, those are the 2 recommendations that are probably very important, like for the youth going forward. The first thing is look at things subjectively, not objectively. Because your dad is NRM, you're saying, me, whatever happens, I am pro-yellow. For me, that is a problem. Don't be pro-yellow. Make a decision for yourself. And that's why then reading becomes important as the second recommendation. Yeah. Reading and having the information. When you have that, you can then make the decision that is probably the best decision. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, Kaka, for your recommendations. And that has been it for our show. We would like to know what you think in the comment section down below. Please join the conversation and we shall be here next time. It has been our show and I have been your host, Sharon Mukisa. Thank you for watching.